I'd folded that sweater 17 times before I finally let it rest on my bed. It was cashmere, the colour of winter fog, soft enough to hurt when you touched it. My grandmother had sent it from Scotland 3 months before she died. She'd written my name on the package in shaking letters, underlined it twice, as if ink could protect what love couldn't. I'd worn it once, just once, to feel her close to me again. Now it was gone. I stood in the doorway of my sister's room, watching her laugh into her phone, my sweater draped across her shoulders like it had always belonged there. The fabric caught the afternoon light differently on her body, looked cheaper somehow, like everything beautiful did when she touched it. "Oh my God, I know," she said to whoever was listening. "It's so soft. I just found it in Helena's closet. She never wears it anyway." Found it, as if my closed drawers were a public library, as if my grief were a lending service. I didn't say anything. I'd learned years ago that my voice didn't register in this house unless I was apologising or agreeing. I just stood there, my fingers pressed white against the doorframe, watching her perform happiness in my inheritance. She finally noticed me. Her eyes flickered over with that particular combination of annoyance and entitlement that she'd perfected by the time she was 12. "What?" she said, covering the phone. "I'll give it back." We both knew she wouldn't. We both knew I wouldn't ask again. That was how it had always worked between us. She took, I disappeared, and everyone called it peace. I turned away and walked down the hall. My parents' voices drifted up from the kitchen, talking about her college fund, her internship, her future. They'd stopped asking about mine 2 years ago, right around the time they'd realised she was prettier when she smiled and I was quieter when I didn't. The house felt smaller every day, like it was collapsing around the space I took up. I went to my room and sat on the floor beside my bed. The empty space where the sweater had been looked like an accusation. I'd promised my grandmother I'd take care of it. I'd promised her a lot of things, actually, most of them about taking care of myself. I was 23 years old and I'd broken every single one. My phone buzzed. Ethan, my boyfriend of 4 years, texting to cancel dinner again. Some emergency with work, some friend who needed him more, some version of later that we both knew meant never. I read the message 3 times, waiting to feel something. Anger maybe, disappointment, but there was nothing left inside me sharp enough to cut through the numbness. I'd been hollow so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to have substance. I texted back, "Okay." He sent a heart emoji. I stared at it until it stopped meaning anything at all. The sun moved across my floor in slow inches. Downstairs, my sister laughed again, louder this time, like joy were a competitive sport and she was winning. I could hear my mother laughing with her, that warm, indulgent sound she saved for her favourite daughter. I pulled my knees to my chest and rested my forehead against them. The carpet smelled like dust and resignation. I'd vacuumed it yesterday, but some things can't be cleaned away. The nothing inside me was getting louder. I thought about my grandmother's last letter. She'd written it a week before the stroke, when her hand still remembered how to hold a pen steady. Most of it had been gentle nonsense, updates about her garden, questions about my studies, reminders to drink enough water. But at the end, she'd written something that had felt like a premonition. "Don't let them make you smaller, darling. You were never meant to fold." I've been folding ever since. That night, Ethan finally called. Not to apologise, he never apologised, but to tell me he'd be out late again. I could hear music in the background, laughter that didn't include me. "You understand, right?" he said. "I knew you would. You always do." I did understand. I understood that I'd become the kind of person who was easy to disappoint because I'd never asked for anything difficult. I understood that love, for me, had always meant making myself convenient. "Helena, you there?" "I'm here," I said. "Great. I'll make it up to you. Promise." He hung up before I could respond. Not that I had anything to say. I'd used up all my words years ago, spent them on people who'd never learnt to listen. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster. 47 of them, spreading out like veins from a central wound. I'd counted them so many times I'd memorized their patterns, the way you memorize damage when you live inside it long enough. Sleep came slowly, reluctantly, like it knew I didn't deserve the rest. And then it came too easily. I felt it happen, the gentle shutting down of my body, the quiet failure of my heart. No pain, just a slow dimming, like someone was turning down the volume on my existence until there was nothing left but static. My last thought was about the sweater, how I'd never wear it again, how she'd probably donate it in 6 months when she got bored, how my grandmother's love would end up in a stranger's closet, soft and grey and forgotten. Then nothing, then everything. I opened my eyes to morning light and the smell of coffee from downstairs. My phone was buzzing on my nightstand. 5 texts from Ethan, all sent at 2 a.m, all variations of "miss you" that meant nothing. I stared at them for a long moment, my mind trying to catch up with my body. This was 3 years ago. The date on my phone confirmed it. The texts confirmed it. The sound of my sister's voice downstairs, younger and sharper, confirmed it. I was 20 years old again. Back in the beginning, before the slow erosion had worn me down to nothing. I sat up slowly, testing my limbs, my breath, my clarity. Everything felt different. Not new, I still carried the memory of how it had ended, but clean somehow, like I'd been given back to myself before I'd learnt to give myself away. I knew exactly what day this was. I remembered it down to the minute. This was the morning my sister would borrow my favourite jacket for a date and spill wine on it. This was the day my mother would ask me to skip my art class to help with her charity event. This was the day Ethan would forget my birthday for the first time, setting the pattern for every disappointment that followed. This was the day I'd said yes to everything and meant it, but I'd lived through the consequences of those yeses. I died from them. I stood up and looked at myself in the mirror. Same face, same body, same life. But the eyes looking back at me were older than they should have been, steadier, emptied of expectation. I understood what I'd been given. A second chance, a reset, a chance to rewrite every moment I'd let them write over me. I got dressed slowly, deliberately, choosing clothes I actually liked instead of ones that wouldn't draw attention. My sister's voice carried up the stairs. She was asking my mother if she could borrow something of mine. Something blue, something I never wore anyway. I walked downstairs and found them in the kitchen, mid-negotiation over my closet. "Oh, good. You're up," my mother said, not looking at me. "Lily wants to know if she can borrow—" "No," I said. The word landed like a stone in still water. They both turned to look at me confused, as if I'd spoken a foreign language. "What?" Lily said, smiling like I was joking. "No," I repeated, calm, clear, immovable. "She can't borrow anything of mine." My mother laughed, uncomfortable. "Helena, don't be difficult. It's just a jacket. Then she can buy her own." I poured myself coffee, my hand steady, my heart quieter than it had been in years. The silence behind me was thick with their shock. I'd never said no before. I'd never even considered it. "Wow," Lily said finally, her voice sharp with practiced hurt. "I didn't know you were so selfish." I turned to face her. She was 16, beautiful in that thoughtless way of people who'd never had to earn kindness. I'd spent years trying to keep her happy, as if her happiness were my responsibility, as if my misery were the price of family peace. "I'm not selfish," I said quietly. "I'm just done." I took my coffee and went back upstairs, leaving them to process the impossible reality of my refusal. I could hear them whispering, confused, probably planning how to guilt me back into compliance later. But I wouldn't be compliant anymore. I'd already lived that life. I knew where it ended. The rest of the morning unfolded in strange, familiar patterns. My mother came to my room twice, trying different approaches. Disappointment first, then concern, then veiled threats about family unity. I listened politely and said no to everything. She left, frustrated, baffled by this version of me she'd never met. Lily tried next, tears in her eyes, performing the hurt I used to believe was real. "I don't understand," she said. "We're sisters. We share things." "You take things," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." "Mom's right. You've changed. You're being so weird." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'm just being myself for the first time." She left angry, slamming the door hard enough to make my walls shake. I didn't flinch. I'd learned that other people's anger was only powerful if you agreed to carry it. Ethan called at noon, his voice warm with expectation. "Hey, beautiful. Want to grab lunch?" He'd forgotten, just like I remembered. My birthday was in 3 hours, and he had no idea. "Can't today," I said. "Oh, okay. Tomorrow?" "Probably not." There was a pause, confusion creeping into his tone. "Is something wrong?" Everything was wrong. Our entire relationship was built on my willingness to settle and his willingness to let me. But I didn't say that. I'd learned that some truths didn't need to be explained to people who'd never asked the right questions. "I'm just busy," I said. "I'll call you later." I hung up before he could respond, before the familiar guilt could creep in and make me apologize for having boundaries. The afternoon stretched out in luxurious solitude. I painted, something I'd stopped doing in my first life because it wasn't practical and didn't lead anywhere. The canvas didn't care about outcomes. It just received what I gave it. No judgment, no expectation. I painted my grandmother's garden, the one from her letters, full of roses she'd named after people she loved. There was one called Helena, deep red and stubborn, that refused to bloom on schedule. "Just like you," she'd written, "beautiful in your own time." I'd never believed her before. I tried so hard to bloom when everyone else wanted, to be beautiful on their terms, that I'd forgotten what my own timing felt like. The painting wasn't good. I was too out of practice, too rusty from years of not trying. But it was mine, completely mine, and that made it perfect. That evening, my father came home from work. He barely looked at me, never had, really, just headed straight for Lily's room to hear about her day. Through the walls, I could hear her complaining about me, painting me as cruel and unreasonable. I waited for the old instinct to kick in, the need to defend myself, to smooth things over, to apologize for existing wrong. But it didn't come. I'd spent years being sorry for taking up space. I was done apologizing for having substance. Dinner was tense. Lily wouldn't look at me. My mother kept making pointed comments about family and generosity. My father ate in oblivious silence, scrolling through his phone between bites. I ate slowly, tasting my food for the first time in years. "Helena," my mother said finally, her patience wearing thin. "This attitude needs to stop. We don't treat each other this way in this family." "You're right," I said. "We don't. You let Lily take whatever she wants from me and call it sharing. You cancel my plans to accommodate hers and call it flexibility. You forget about me until you need something and call it family." The silence that followed was absolute. "That's not fair," my mother said, her voice tight. "No," I agreed. "It's not. It hasn't been fair for a very long time." I stood up, cleared my plate, and went back to my room. Behind me, I could hear them starting to argue. About me, probably. About what had gotten into me. About how to fix this disruption I'd caused. But I wasn't a disruption. I was just no longer willing to be invisible. Ethan called again at midnight, finally remembering. "Happy birthday," he said, sheepish. "I'm sorry I forgot earlier. I'm an idiot." "Yes," I said. "You are." "Harsh," he laughed, thinking I was joking. Let me make it up to you. Dinner tomorrow? No. No? Come on, Helena, don't be like that. Like what? Like someone who knows her worth? Like someone who won't accept the bare minimum anymore? Another pause, longer this time. What's going on with you? I'm figuring it out, I said, but I don't think you're part of the answer. Are you breaking up with me? I thought about it. In my first life, I'd stayed with him for 4 more years, waiting for him to choose me, to see me, to love me the way I'd loved him. He never did. He'd just gotten comfortable with my low expectations. Yes, I said, I am. But I hung up, turned off my phone, sat in the dark and felt the enormous relief of letting go. The weeks that followed were strange and liberating. My family didn't know how to handle this version of me, the one who said no, who had boundaries, who refused to shrink. They tried everything, guilt, anger, the silent treatment, bribes. None of it worked. I'd already lived through the worst they could do to me. I'd already died from their neglect. There was nothing left they could threaten me with. Lily stopped talking to me entirely, which was fine. Our relationship had always been one-sided anyway. She took, I gave, and we called it sisterhood. Without my participation, there was nothing left between us but honest distance. My mother tried harder. She'd catch me in hallways, in the kitchen, try to negotiate my compliance like it was a contract we'd signed. I don't understand what happened to you, she said one morning, frustrated. You used to be so sweet, so agreeable. I used to be so empty, I corrected. There's a difference. You're being selfish, Helena. Family means sacrifice. It should mean sacrifice from everyone, I said, not just from me. She didn't have an answer for that. She'd never had to think about it before. I started filling my time with things I'd abandoned in my first life. I took art classes again. I joined a volunteer program at the local community centre, teaching painting to kids who couldn't afford lessons. I made friends, real ones, who asked about my day and remembered my answers. I moved through my life like someone who'd earned the right to exist in it. 3 months after my rebirth, on a cold morning in October, I was getting ready for class when Lily appeared in my doorway. She looked different, smaller somehow, less certain. Can we talk? She asked. I nodded, curious. She came in and sat on my bed, her hands twisting in her lap. I need to borrow money for this dress I really want, for Jordan's party. Jordan's party. I remembered it. In my first life, I'd lent her $200 for a dress she'd worn once and never paid back. She'd looked beautiful. I'd looked like an ATM. No, I said. Please, Mom said to ask you. Mom has money. Ask her. She said no, said I've been spending too much. Lily looked up at me, and for the first time I saw a real desperation in her eyes. You always help me, please. I used to always help you, I corrected, past tense. Why are you being like this? You're my sister. Exactly, I said. I'm your sister, not your bank, not your closet, not your backup plan when everyone else says no. She stared at me, tears forming. They used to work on me. They used to make me cave immediately, desperate to make her happy. You've changed, she said. You used to care about me. I used to care about everyone except myself. Oh, I said, I'm trying something different now. She left without another word. I heard her crying to my mother downstairs, heard my mother's soothing voice promising they'd figure something else out. I felt nothing. Not guilt, not satisfaction, just the quiet neutrality of someone who'd stopped setting themselves on fire to keep other people warm. The dress arrived in the mail 2 weeks later. My mother had bought it for her after all. Lily wore it to the party and posted pictures all over social media, glowing and happy and beautiful. I didn't feel jealous. I didn't feel anything. She was living her life and I was finally living mine. The real test came in December, 3 days before Christmas. I was in my room, wrapping presents I'd actually wanted to give, when Lily knocked. She came in without waiting for an answer, her eyes bright with something between hope and desperation. "I found it," she said. "Found what?" "That sweater. The grey one. The one from your grandmother." My heart stopped. I'd packed it away carefully this time, hidden it in the back of my closet behind boxes and winter coats. But somehow she'd found it anyway, like she had a radar for things that mattered to me. "I was looking for your blue scarf," she continued, "and I saw it. It's so beautiful. I was thinking—" "No," I said. "But I didn't even—" "No," I repeated. "You don't get to touch that. You don't get to borrow it. You don't even get to look at it." Her face fell. "It's just a sweater." "No," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "It's my grandmother's love. It's the last thing she sent me before she died. It's mine, and you don't get to take it just because you want it." "God, you're so dramatic now, so possessive." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just learnt the difference between sharing and being taken from." She stood there for a moment, fighting some internal battle between entitlement and reality. I watched her, calm, unmoved, ready to physically remove her if necessary. Finally, she turned and walked out, her shoulders stiff with rejection. I locked my door after her, pulled out the sweater, held it against my face and breathed in the faint scent of my grandmother's perfume, still clinging to the fibres after all this time. I'd protected it. I'd protected myself. I'd kept the promise I'd broken in my first life. Christmas morning was quieter than usual. Lily barely acknowledged me, still hurt by my refusal. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure how to handle the tension they'd never had to notice before. I gave them each thoughtful presents, things I'd chosen carefully, things that showed I knew who they were. They gave me generic gifts, barely wrapped, clearly last-minute additions to Lily's pile. I didn't care. I'd stopped waiting for them to see me. I'd started seeing myself instead. After dinner, after the forced smiles and awkward conversations, I went for a walk. The neighbourhood was quiet, covered in that particular hush that snow brings. I walked past houses full of families, full of light and noise and belonging. I used to feel jealous of that, used to feel like I was missing something essential, something everyone else had figured out except me. But I didn't feel that anymore. I felt complete, whole, contained. The new year came quietly. I was accepted into an art program I'd never applied to in my first life, too afraid of failure, too convinced I didn't deserve it. My portfolio, built from months of actually trying instead of hiding, was apparently good enough. I celebrated alone in my room, drinking cheap champagne and feeling genuinely happy for the first time in both my lives. February brought another test. Lily got into a fight with her best friend over something petty and dramatic. She came to my room at midnight, crying, needing someone to talk to. In my first life, I would have stayed up all night, absorbed her pain, fixed her problems, made myself tired for days to make her feel better. This time, I opened the door, looked at her tear-stained face and said gently, "I'm not your therapist. Call someone who's your actual friend." "You're so cold now," she said, hurt and confused. "I'm so healthy now," I corrected. "There's a difference." She left. She'd figure it out. Or she wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility to carry her through every crisis she created. Spring came, and with it, clarity. I'd been living my second life for 6 months now, and the patterns had become obvious. Every time my family tried to pull me back into old dynamics, I refused. Every time they pushed, I held my ground. Eventually, they stopped pushing. They didn't like it, didn't understand it, but they adapted. Lily started borrowing from her friends instead. My mother started asking my father for help with her events. They found other people to fill the space I'd left behind, and the house didn't collapse without me. I'd thought I was essential. Turns out I was just convenient. In April, I ran into Ethan at a coffee shop. He was with someone new, a girl who laughed too loud and touched his arm too much. He saw me and looked guilty, like he'd been caught. "Helena," he said, awkward. Hey, this is Amanda, my girlfriend." I looked at her, pretty, young, eager. She had the same look in her eyes I'd had 3 years ago, the look of someone who thought she'd won something precious. "Nice to meet you," I said, meaning it. Ethan seemed thrown. "You're okay with this?" "Why wouldn't I be? I just thought, we were together for a while and now we're not," I finished. "And that's fine. I hope you're happy." I meant that too. Not for him. He'd be the same with Amanda as he'd been with me, mediocre and self-centered and perfectly content with low effort. But I hoped she figured it out faster than I had. I hoped she said no before she lost herself in his maybes. I left them there, walked out into the spring air, and felt nothing but relief. That night, I organised my closet. I'd been putting it off, unsure I was ready, but something about seeing Ethan had given me permission to let go completely. I pulled out every piece of clothing Lily had ever borrowed and ruined, every gift people had given me that I'd never liked, every item I'd kept out of guilt or obligation or fear of seeming ungrateful. I folded them carefully, one by one, and loaded them into boxes. 3 boxes full of things I'd never wanted, never asked for, never chosen for myself. I drove to the donation centre the next morning. The woman at the counter smiled as I unloaded everything. "Spring cleaning?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. I saved the best pieces for last, a designer jacket my aunt had given Lily that she'd accidentally left in my closet after borrowing it, a pair of expensive heels Lily had begged to wear to prom, a silk scarf Lily had claimed she needed for a job interview. Everything Lily had ever coveted from me, everything she'd taken or wanted to take, everything she'd eyed with that particular hunger of someone who thought desire was the same as deserving. All of it donated, given to strangers who'd appreciate it without entitlement, gone to people who'd say thank you instead of "I'll give it back." The woman gave me a receipt for tax purposes. I took it, thanked her, and walked back to my car feeling lighter than I had in years. That evening, Lily came to my room in a panic. "Where's the blue jacket? The one Aunt Michelle gave me. I left it in your closet for safekeeping and now it's gone." "I donated it," I said calmly. "You what?" "It was mine. Aunt Michelle gave it to me, not to you. You just borrowed it and never gave it back. So, I donated it." "But I needed it. I was going to wear it to—" "Doesn't matter," I said. "It wasn't yours to need." She stared at me, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. "What else did you donate?" "Everything," I said. "Everything you ever took, touched, or wanted. It's all gone, given to people who will actually be grateful for it." "You're insane. You're actually insane." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'm just done letting you take things that were never meant for you." She ran to my mother, crying, outraged, demanding justice. I could hear them downstairs, my mother trying to soothe her, promising to talk to me, to fix this. My mother came up 20 minutes later, her face tight with controlled anger. "That was cruel," she said. "Those were expensive things." "Those were my things," I corrected. "And it wasn't cruel, it was fair." "Fair? Your sister is devastated." "Good," I said, and I meant it. Maybe she'll learn that other people's belongings aren't hers to claim. Maybe she'll learn to ask before she takes. Maybe she'll learn that wanting something doesn't mean deserving it. When did you become so hard? I thought about that. When had I become hard? When I died from being too soft? When I'd realised that kindness without boundaries was just self-destruction with better marketing? "I'm not hard," I said finally. "I'm just finished. finished being your backup, finished being her closet, finished being everyone's second choice and nobody's priority. My mother left without another word. She stopped trying to fix me after that. She stopped trying to understand me too. We existed in the same house like polite strangers, orbiting separate lives. It should have hurt. It would have destroyed me in my first life. But I'd already been destroyed once. This was just truth, and truth was cleaner than the lies I'd lived before. Summer came with opportunities. My art program offered me a scholarship to study in Seattle for a year. In my first life, I would have said no. Too far from family, too selfish, too impractical. This time, I said yes immediately. I told my parents at dinner one night in July. They barely reacted. My father nodded absently. My mother said something about me doing what I wanted anyway these days. Lily didn't even look up from her phone. "When do you leave?" my mother asked. "August 15th. "That's soon." "Yes." There was nothing else to say. We'd become people who shared space but not lives, relatives by blood but strangers by choice. The night before I left, I stood in my empty room, boxes packed, goodbyes said to the few people who'd mattered. My grandmother's sweater was folded carefully in my carry-on, wrapped in tissue paper, protected. Heard a soft knock. Lily stood in the doorway, awkward and uncertain. "You're really leaving," she said. "I am." "Because of me?" I considered that. Was I leaving because of her, because of them, because of who I'd been before? "No," I said honestly. "I'm leaving because of me. Because I finally can." She nodded slowly, processing. "I'm sorry," she said. For taking things. For not asking. For not seeing that it mattered." It was the first real apology she'd ever given me. In my first life, it never came at all. "Thank you," I said. "Are we okay?" I thought about that too. Were we okay? We'd never be close. Too much damage, too many years of imbalance. But we could be honest, finally, after all this time. "We're different people who happen to be related," I said, "and maybe that's okay too." She left quietly. I didn't hear her cry, but I suspected she did. Not for me, necessarily, but for the version of us that never really existed, the sister bond she'd taken for granted until it was gone. The next morning, I loaded my car, hugged my parents in that stiff way we'd perfected, and drove away from the house I'd grown up in. In my rearview mirror, I watched it get smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry. I just felt free. Seattle was cold and grey and beautiful. I found a small apartment near the university, painted the walls colours I actually liked, filled it with things I'd chosen for myself. I made new friends who knew me as Helena, just Helena, with no history of who I used to be or who I'd failed to become. I painted every day. Some pieces were good, some were terrible. All of them were mine. One afternoon, in October, exactly a year after I'd refused to lend Lily money, I got a message from my mother. Just a photo, no words. It was Lily, standing in front of a thrift store, holding up my grandmother's sweater. My heart stopped. Impossible. I'd kept it safe. I'd brought it with me. It was in my closet right now. I'd checked this morning. Then, I looked closer. It wasn't my sweater. It was similar, grey, cashmere, vintage, but not the same. Different buttons, different collar. The text that followed explained, "Lily found one that looks just like yours at a thrift shop. Thought you'd want to know she's respecting your boundaries now. She bought her own." I stared at the photo for a long time. Lily was smiling, but it was different from her old smiles. Less performative, more genuine. She looked older, somehow, more real. I typed back, "Goodness for her." And I meant it. That evening, I pulled out my grandmother's sweater and held it against the fading light. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, fainter now, almost gone, but still there. I put it on for the second time in both my lives. It fit perfectly. I stood in front of my mirror and looked at myself, 23 years old in this life, but older in all the ways that mattered. I'd died once from making myself small. I'd been reborn into the truth that taking up space wasn't selfish, it was necessary. The sweater was warm against my skin, soft and perfect and completely mine. I thought about Lily buying her own version, finally learning that coveting wasn't the same as having, that wanting something didn't mean taking it. I thought about my parents learning to function without using me as their emotional support system. I thought about Ethan with his new girlfriend, probably teaching her the same lessons I'd already learned. They'd all survive without me. They were surviving without me, and I was finally, actually living. I made myself tea and sat by the window, watching the Seattle rain paint grey patterns on the glass. Somewhere in another city, another life, my sister was probably wearing her thrift store sweater, maybe learning what I'd learned, that the best things are the ones you earn for yourself, the ones that come without taking from someone else. I hoped she'd figure it out. I hoped they all would. But more than that, I hoped they'd understand that I didn't need them to. I'd spent my first life waiting for permission to exist, for approval, for someone to finally choose me first. In my second life, I'd learnt the most important thing. The person who needed to choose me first was me. The rain kept falling. The sweater kept me warm. The silence around me was full of peace instead of emptiness. I'd donated everything she'd ever coveted, and in doing so, I'd finally kept the only thing that mattered, myself.